Welcome everyone to Making the News, Getting Media Coverage. And all right, so first let's talk about messaging real quick. So when you have a campaign, issue campaign, electoral campaign, you want to start by developing your message before trying to get media. So where to start? Look at the Green Party platform. There's the national platform, state platforms. You may even have a local platform. Find issues that match the jurisdiction of the office you're running for. So city council, mayor is going to have very different focus than running for Senate or president. You want to focus on 3 to 5 key issues. Media and voters have limited time, space, and attention, and you want to have a little bit of diversity in your key issues. For example, you don't want all 5 of your key issues to be environmental issues. It's good to, or you don't want them all to be economic issues and ignore climate change. You want to have issues that people care about, and well, we'll get to key issues in just a second. There's hot issues in the news, and that taking a position on those makes your campaign more interesting to the media. You do want to consult with trusted people before stepping into the debate, and that's to get the best possible message and also make sure you don't step on any landmines. So these, you can also call them wedge issues. They set you apart from the incumbent and other opponents. So you want to look at your opponents and say, what issues are they on the wrong side of? What are the issues where they don't have a position? Maybe they have a position but no action. Or maybe they even take action but it's not strong enough. All of these are possible wedge issues that you can use to drive a wedge between your opponent and their supporters and get them over to your side. So we're talking about key issues, things to think about. What's important to people in your district, not just to you, but to people in your district. So look at state and national polls of top issues, and that at least is a place to start. Talk to people about what they care about, but beware of being caught in the echo chamber. If you go to the Save the Sharks meeting, obviously people are going to care a lot about sharks. That doesn't necessarily mean that's everyone's top issue. Include the most important issues for your target constituencies. If you know that you're going for Black Lives Matter activists, make sure that's one of your key issues. Some issues in your platform, even important ones, may have too narrow appeal to be key issues. For example, I really care about proportional representation and democracy reform, but I don't lead with that because that's not a well-known hot issue that a lot of people are fired up about right now. You need to be able to answer this question: why are you running? You need a 1-sentence version, a 1-minute version, and a 3 to 5 minute version, depending on the situation. So 1-sentence version would be if there's something in the New York Times mentioning you, 1 paragraph, you get 1 sentence. The 1-minute version is the elevator speech, and when you're meeting people on the street, you're going to give that all the time. The 3 to 5 minute version is if you get a radio interview or a TV interview and they actually give you some space to speak. Let people know that you're running to win, or they won't take your campaign seriously. If you ever say that you are not running to win, then they won't even listen to the other stuff that you're saying. So even if you care most about getting the issues out there, say that you're running to win. But it's not just about winning, it's not just about raising issues, but you need to give voice to a motivation that resonates with people. So that could be your story, or it could be your worldview. So an example of a story is one of your family members couldn't afford health care. That motivated you to run. You're running to change that. That's something people can relate to. Or it could be your worldview. So you could say, government is failing regular people, and you're running to change that. That's also something that resonates with people. And once you say why you're motivated to run, it's not just because you want your name in the headlines, but it's because I care about the same things that you care about. That's when people will start to join you. So you need a campaign story because people respond to stories more than issues or opinions. Again, it's not just a list of issues. There's a story, there's a whole message. So, like I said, before they support you, people need to identify with something about you, and they need to feel that they can trust you. So your campaign story can include your life story, or at least parts of your life story, and your connection to your community. People don't want to feel like you just came out of nowhere and you have some issues that you really care about. You know, that's not quite enough. Then telling your campaign story. So it can include your experience, your qualifications, community involvement, why you decided to run, as we talked about, your vision for your community, your state, your country, the world, and you'll probably need help developing your story. So ask your campaign manager and other trusted people to help. In fact, some people say the candidate is not the best person to come up with the story. It's good to have a second opinion, someone you trust. Then after people ask, why are you running? What's your story? They'll say, well, why are you green? So you need to be ready to answer this question too. Here are some sample answers. You know, again, it's part of your story, but these might have some appeal. So you could say it's because of the green values of peace, justice, democracy, ecology. You know, that resonates with me. You can say the Green Party is a people's party that doesn't take money from corporate interests, lobbyists, or super PACs. So there's no corruption, and you know, we have a firewall against corruption. You can say the two-party system isn't doing a good job representing us, and it's time for more voices and more choices. So again, it's your story. It depends on what motivates you and what you're going to be able to say with conviction, but these are all examples. So then, we were talking about message. There's a core message. You have to repeat the same message many, many times. That's basically what politics is. So there's a time and a place for issues outside your core message, but in most situations, you want to focus on your 3 to 5 key issues. Because again, voters have limited attention span. Media particularly has limited attention span. A lot of times, you're lucky if they give you 3. So make the message stick. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. Slogans. You may want a slogan that sums up your campaign in a catchy phrase. And you can borrow if you want. Some examples: people, planet, and peace over profit. An America that works for all of us. For the greater good. Progressive, activist, neighbor. So this last one, I borrowed from a local campaign that was very successful, and actually the sort of local progressive community upset the Democratic Party favorite, but all the others we've borrowed from the Stein-Baraka campaign. As you can see on our Wisconsin Green Party shirt, for the greater good. And we've got people, planet, and peace over profit.
It's in our hands.
It's in our hands was a good one. Yeah. Yeah, borrow them, use them. So earned media, that's basically everything that you don't pay for. Once you develop your message, time to earn media, and start by getting a press list. So that's a contact list of journalists who might cover your campaign. You can get it from your party, or if necessary, you can make your own. And then put out press releases. So for important events like campaign announcement, important issues, if it's tied to what we call a news peg, something that's currently in the news, it's much more likely to get coverage. So say, for example, a dam just burst, and here's the Green candidate with a press release saying, I told you this was going to happen, and here's why we need a Green New Deal to fix this crumbling infrastructure. That's much more likely to get in the news than just, oh, it's a random Tuesday, here's why we need a Green New Deal. Obviously include contact info, and the press release should say very succinctly who, what, where, when, why. When I say succinctly, I mean basically 2 paragraphs or less. So, oh yes, and you want to include a quote that you would like to see in the story, because sometimes they will say, here's what the Green candidate had to say about it, and they'll have a quote. So if you have a press conference or some other event, you want to send a press release immediately afterwards. So you can also think of a press release as a cheat sheet for journalists who weren't there. Obviously, it's best if they show up, but in case they don't, but are still paying attention, send them the press release so they can write the story as if they were there. So press advisories are similar to press releases, but they notify media about events before they happen. So they're even shorter. Send one before your campaign announcement to get journalists to come, and then afterwards you send a press release to shape the story for journalists. Even if they were there, you want to sort of give them the key details, remind them, and hey, yeah, include those quotes that you really want to see in the story. So these are even shorter, they're just the facts, and don't give away the whole message. You want them to be a little bit mysterious and intriguing. So press conference is an event where you speak and then take questions from journalists, right? So it can be difficult to get journalists to show up, especially with cuts to local media and everything. So you should make calls to journalists who you think are your best prospects to show up. Anticipate likely questions and prepare talking points to answer them. You don't want to be caught off guard at your campaign announcement. And you can have other speakers at press conferences that can add interest for press. So local people who are affected by these unfair laws and systems, or if you have high-profile supporters or surrogates, like Cornell West, then bring them out to a press conference. And visuals are good to illustrate your point. So a factory is closing down. Go there and have a press conference with a bunch of angry workers. Or there's a lake that's full of pollution. Go there to talk about environmental protection, because a good story has a good picture, right? So you need someone in your campaign to do press relations. So this could be a campaign manager, or if you have a press or communications director. So they have contact with media and they build relationships with journalists and outlets. So outreach to media, handling media requests, making arrangements for interviews and things like that, sending them the quote. And yeah, also review the stories and request corrections. If they misquote you, or if they say, you were out there in a street fight last night and you weren't, then make sure that you get on that. Because hey, the media lies about us sometimes. What are you going to do? Get out there and tell them to fix it. So generally, you want to maintain professional and cordial relationship with media. And I have actually never broken this rule. The only thing is if you see someone from Breitbart who wants to interview you, you can say, oh, no, we're not going to do that. But still, they're just doing their jobs, especially the people who are arranging the interviews. So we want to be very professional and, keep our commitments, etc. So just be aware media can be friendly, they can be neutral, they can be hostile. So be mindful corporate media has a frequent negative treatment of Greens, and prepare for that. So you want to look into journalists' previous work, and especially about Greens. I always search their Twitter for clues, because when a new person or a new outlet I've never heard of says, hey, we want to talk to Jill Stein, right? I'm going to go into their Twitter and say, were they tweeting about the Green New Deal and stuff? Or were they saying, Jill Stein is controlled by Putin? And, it's amazing that a lot of journalists now will just put it right out there on their social media. Basically, you can see if they're going to give you a fair interview. So the media outlet doesn't always define the journalist, but they usually stay inside their outlet's boundaries. So some people say, oh, I won't go on Fox News, or I won't go on any outlet that I disagree with. And I would advise against that approach. I would say try to get in front of as many people as you can, particularly ones with an established audience. If there's just a local right-wing podcaster who's crazy and wants to argue with you, you can say no. But if it's a, if it's a chance to go on a national TV network, take it. So yeah, preparing for an interview, research, find out, is it print, TV or video, is it radio, how long is it, what topics are gonna be covered, is it live or taped? Prepare for success. Do your homework, prepare talking points. You wanna dress and groom appropriately. I was camping just before this, but you can't tell because I trimmed my beard. Or maybe you can. Be well rested. Don't stay up all night cramming. Arrive early, or at least plan to arrive early. You don't want to run into traffic, show up 20 minutes late to your live interview. And ask the interviewers or staff what you need to know. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Particularly if you're nervous that it's going to be a trap. I remember a recent exchange. Oh, we want to talk to Jill Stein about, just what's she thinking about Howard Schultz and the current political situation, and maybe something else. Like, oh, okay. What other topics are? Well, we probably won't get to any other topics. But if you do, what are they? Well, we might want to ask how the Russia investigation is going, and just briefly touch on that. I was like, okay. They're going to talk about Russia from the start, which is what happened. So next, okay. So if you're on if you're on video, be mindful of how you look. So you want to smile and make eye contact. You want to avoid nervous tics, and even things you wouldn't normally think about. Don't nod along to something you disagree with. Things like that can get you into trouble. Right? Again, stick to your core message. It's fine if you repeat yourself. It's fine if you repeat yourself. Listeners are probably tuning in and out every minute anyway. So if you're on the radio for 15 minutes, you can say the same thing several times. Be careful with humor. Some people are funny and they know it. Other people think they're funny. But sarcasm may not come across to viewers and readers. And we still have people who say, oh, Jill Stein said this, when she was making a joke, but it was a print interview. So, it's easy to misrepresent a sarcastic comment, right? And say, oh, how could you say that? So yeah, just be careful with humor. And if the interview is taped, you can ask the interview if do-overs are possible before the interview, of course. You don't want to just pull that out in the middle, but particularly if it's a friendly interview and say it's an hour-long podcast, you might be able to say, I kind of didn't answer, that answer wasn't quite right. I'd like to redo that, and a lot of times they'll be accommodating. Okay, so don't speak too fast. Repeat important points. Use powerful, vivid words. As opposed to sort of academic, dead language. Don't bring extra attention to your mistakes. Don't be Rick Perry and I've got 3 things and then forget what the 3rd thing is. Just and if you do screw up, move on. Show that you care and be passionate, but be professional. TV is a cold medium, and what in person could be a fiery speech, to the viewer at home could look like, the Dean Scream or something. So yeah, try to keep your cool. Think about common ground and bringing people in. So again, you're reaching a general audience now. And I say, remember, you didn't always know what you know, and you didn't always think what you think now, right? So there's something that changed your mind at some point. So again, think about common ground, try to come with a positive approach. You can, you can single out bad actors, but those should be powerful people, powerful corporations. It's not the voters who we're running against here. So try to bring them in. Talking points. The definition is a succinct statement designed to support persuasively one side of an issue. Keyword succinct. So interviewers often take just one line from your statement, which is we call a soundbite. And sometimes they'll take your weakest line and present it out of context. So you want to protect yourself by preparing and sticking to strong talking points. I mean, we've all seen this, right? They take the soundbite and they take it out of context and it looks bad. So if you know your talking points and if you stick to them, then you'll be able to protect yourself against that. And hopefully you'll get your strongest lines out in the media. But they're not scripted statements, they're arguments that are boiled down to the essence. So the wording can change, but the point stays the same. And stay on message. Again, if you go to a candidate debate and you end up talking about Area 51 or something like that, that's what people are going to focus on, right? And you're going to be seen as a crazy UFO candidate. So, and maybe at the time it was just a joke, but now they're going to focus on that. So you want to really stick to your core message. Stick closely to those key issues and beware of improvising. Because if you go off message, like I said, your campaign can go off the rails. So journalists and opponents try to catch you off guard, and you should beware of attempted gotcha moments. And a lot of these you can kind of see coming or anticipate, but you should answer questions clearly before expanding on them. So a lot of times questions are simple, answers are complex. But you should first make sure that you're answering the question, and then you can go into the details. Because if you start by saying, well, that's a very complicated issue, and let me just provide a bit of context, then people will try to twist that to say, you dodged the question, you didn't want to talk about it. If you don't know the answer, then say so, and offer to get back to them after looking into it. Actually, in the Mueller hearings the other day, someone asked, Mueller, this is a yes or no question. Do you agree with this? And he's like, no. Well, in your report, here's exactly what you said. Oh, okay, well, if it's in the report, then I guess I do agree with it. So that's, he did not prepare well for that interview. Social media, now part of the political and media landscape. Many journalists are on Twitter. It can be a great tool to insert yourself into the conversation. Heck, you can bypass the journalist and you can go straight to your opponent and be tweeting at them and trying to have a conversation with them. But beware, social media can be a time drain. There's a lot of negativity online. So an off-message tweet or an argument with a troll can be used against you, so be selective about your use of social media. And you can see my workshop, Social Media for Greens 101, for a lot more on social media. So live streaming is a way we can be our own media, reach people directly, include them in the conversation. So candidates can do interactive fireside chats from home, live stream rallies, demonstrations, events, announce these ahead of time so you can build an audience, have a helper to moderate comments and post links and share around. You want someone monitoring your live stream. That helps a lot. So there's Facebook Live, YouTube, the Twitter app Periscope. Those are all good platforms to live stream. Letters to the editor, one of the most read sections in most papers. So you can write them as a candidate, or you can have your supporters write them. And it's a good way to get attention and to show support. Advertising, if it can reach your target audience, think about it. There's print media, there's TV and radio, although it's typically more expensive, but sometimes it can be worth it. Online ads are often less expensive and they can be tailored more to your budget and targeted to reach your audience. So that's a good option. And was that the last slide?
I think so.
Okay, so that's an intro to media messaging. Now we'll talk a little bit about marketing, and then hopefully we'll have more time for Q&A.
Is it already up in summer?
Yes.
How's everybody doing? Good. So, summarize is a lot more detail of some of the things that Dave was talking about. When we market, we're looking at the packaging, we're looking at the message in it, and I'm going to be showing a lot of memes here because I love memes. A lot of people enjoy sharing these, and it's a good way to have extra visuals. So part of this is going to be identifying the problems that we see in our media and identifying some solutions when we do our marketing. And I think it's important to identify problems because if you ever watch the news and you see something about how immigrants are the problem, that's a frame right there. That's somebody telling you that there's this particular problem, and then they're going to provide a solution for you. So we want to have the correct problems and the correct solutions and not have some wild problem that is not really the case. Next. So problem one is that the internet is the marketplace of ideas. We all were told that when you go on the internet, it's going to be this field of everybody being equal and great opportunities for everybody. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things per slide. And we end up with that the idea that is the loudest and the most prominent is also the most important idea. And how we get there is the people who have the most advertising often are the people who get their message out the most. As a prominent YouTuber who's a very leftist guy, he says attention is currency in the marketplace of ideas. And that's very true because when you have more attention, you can get more advertising money. When you get more advertising money, you actually have real money to spend. So it's very much so a marketplace. It's very capitalist. And for those of you who are into social media, if you have seen a lot of things on YouTube lately, the YouTube Rewind has gotten oddly marketable. It's not really about the YouTubers having a good year anymore. It was highly disliked by most of YouTube this last time and had Will Smith and a whole bunch of other people who aren't really YouTubers, they're traditional media people, but they're being pushed by YouTube because that's what gets ad revenue. They're also starting to downplay a lot of indie media people, a lot of small actors in favor of suggesting CNN clips and things like that as well. So this happens across the internet. Something just fun to know is that some of the top pages on Facebook are Vin Diesel's page, Justin Bieber, and Starbucks is number 3 on Facebook. And some of these things get downplayed and demonetized as well. So if you're talking about sex ed, LGBTQ issues, some of these things that have violent imagery too in the news, those might get sorted out by your algorithms and not seen as much, or if you're on YouTube or another one that's monetized, you may just have your content demonetized over it. And yes, it says as much right there. Another unique challenge that we have is we are in the midst of consultant-centered campaigns. And this has been going on for years and years, a couple decades now, where instead of the party bosses getting together and figuring out who's the right person to vote for and getting all the organizing together and all the money together, they farm a lot of that out to year-round consulting businesses that come from advertising and PR. So those people make the ads, they buy the media, they do all of these kinds of things. And we don't have those kinds of resources. So we're going up against that, and it's really important for us to understand. Some of the problems with it is that it's an oligopolistic market. It's meant to have when you have advertisers, you can, next. So when you have this market, you're going from the politician to the party donors to the consultants to the voters. And that's okay. You can put Scott Walker back. His ad, as you can see, doesn't really say anything about who Scott Walker is. It just has him on a motorcycle. Can you guess why he's on a motorcycle? You want to guess why?
Product placement. Harleys in Wisconsin?
Yes, Harley Davidson is huge in Wisconsin, and he wants to make sure that everybody knows he's a man's man and he rides a motorcycle. This is the way that he's marketing himself. It's not really about his policies. He didn't say anything about Harley Davidson, or if he's going to make sure their factory stays open or anything like that. He just wants to make everybody feel good that he's a man's man in Wisconsin and he's going to be the working man's guy. Next image. And it's very much like cologne advertising, where they don't tell you how it smells. They don't tell you anything about that. They just tell you, oh, well, you might get a hot lady if you use this cologne. And it's sort of this feeling, instead of actual information or policies in the case of Scott Walker, or smells in the case of this other kind of advertising. So you get a lot of that from the ad agencies, and it's really important that we understand these businesses are highly involved in the marketplace of our politics as well. And the other issue is that we have some fake news problems. A lot of things seem legit to us. Part of this is poor media literacy. We can see this from the FBI saying everybody's getting scammed online, and we don't really know how to stop that other than to continue to educate people what's a scam and what's not. And people just they can't tell the fake from the real very well. Next. And also, we're inundated with fake news all the time. And by fake news, I'm not meaning news that's just unfavorable to us, because that's one meaning of the term, as we've heard it a lot from the president. But another meaning is that when we're listening to the news in the morning, and let's say it's Christmas, or it's going to be Christmas soon, so you hear about this nice little Christmas thing going on, and then they talk about diamonds in the background. That was an ad that you listened to. That was an ad that you watched that was probably put there by some kind of PR company and is called native advertising. So it looks like news. Maybe the person who put it on had a spot at the end of their segment, and they wanted to put something extra in there. So they packaged this thing, and they said, you know what, we'll play it this time. And journalists often get swamped with these ad pieces, and a lot of them try not to have any of them in their news, but sometimes, people have an extra spot and they don't have the time to fill it with anything else, so they just pick something. And the reason that I put this image here is because we have an extra issue that the regular media moves farther and farther to the right. This guy up here is Ben Shapiro. He started out at Breitbart, and he was called the cool kids philosopher by the New York Times. And here he gets 10 minutes on Nightline, on ABC Nightline, and they focus on how he's such a victim when he goes to college campuses and people don't want him to speak, and it's so against free speech for him. And poor Ben Shapiro, and also, by the way, he gets death threats from Nazis in the far right. But, there was that one time that students really had a riot over at a school, so that's really the biggest problem. And so we have these far-right figures that get into the regular media system, and they move the whole thing to the right. And this actually fascinates me. So I have some more slides that have something to do with this. If it's not your cup of tea, if you don't want to deal with these folks, I can't blame you. But I want everybody to know that it's a big growing trend in the media, in both online media through 4chan and message boards and Facebook and Twitter and everything else, because it's all kind of gotten sucked in. And also, these characters come out in the regular media. And some of you might not really realize his story, but the reason that I have him up on the screen and why it's so important to me is because the mosque shooter in Canada, the Quebec mosque shooter, Ben Shapiro was top on his list of media that he watched. And besides that, the Carmel Synagogue in, I believe it was Indiana, that vandalism was done by people who, in their court case, said that they were radicalized by Ben Shapiro, that they specifically picked a synagogue with bad Jews in it because Ben Shapiro says that there are good Jews and there are bad Jews, which isn't very far from the Nazi site Stormfront. So there's this kind of far-right rabbit hole that a lot of people are going down through just traditional media into these really horrible places online. And as we are not treated very nicely by a lot of the media, it's important to know that these other figures are treated with a lot more respect, and that we have to combat this. Next, please. And did I mention the money flow? There's a lot of money in these campaigns, in all of this stuff. I have been looking into the ways that campaigns are cultural industries. And what I mean by cultural industries is that just like the film business, just like the TV business, all of these businesses that create media, that's what political parties do, and that's what campaigns do. So when they get $1 million and they use it mostly for advertising, they're just like the other cultural industries, and we ought to see some kinds of relations between them. So we have some issues with our media sphere. And now that I've depressed you all greatly, go ahead. And you're saying, well, why bother even try to do this kind of stuff?
Yep.
What if I told you that we can tactically use these media marketplaces to our advantage? So, starting with the traditional media, news persons are human beings. So they have, they're working a job. They're just people going every day to work. And we have some ways to get through to them because they live in our communities and they work in our communities. Go ahead. For one, be accessible. If you have tips, if you have articles, send them in. They might not use them, but they might. Form friendships. If you know any media personnel, ask them what they're involved in. Are they involved in a coalition that you're involved in? Are they animal rights activists? If you read their stories, are they always talking about like the fishing in their town or something? Next, please. As other media people always tell me, if it bleeds, it leads. So they're always looking for something that's eye-catching, and a lot of that is violence on TV, but it's also weird things. One of my TV producer friends from my media department has told me I was the one who picked that we were going to show the story about the two people having sex in the park because it was a weird story and we had an extra segment. So if you have something weird going on, like you want to do a protest but make it kind of silly, if you have something interesting to provide and have just kind of a weird take on it that would really serve as an ending media segment, they might actually pick it up. Don't forget to invite them whenever you have a press event, whenever you have a protest, all these kinds of community things. Always invite the press. They might not always show up, but while you're doing that, you can even think about, do I want to be on the 5 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news? If you do, you might want to have your press events midday, a little bit after midday, because once the news is old a day or two, it's just not going to be shown most likely. Also, be your own PR, package your stories, and make your own native advertising. Advertise the Green Party as if it was a listicle or a how-to. How to make your home greener, brought to you by the Green Party. How to make your own rain barrel, brought to you by the Green Party. It looks very lifestyle oriented, but that's going to be picked up either by traditional media, or if you have it on your Facebook, that stuff gets boosted by the algorithms, because it doesn't have anything to do with war or all these kinds of things that are not advertiser friendly. And of course, go independent, make your own. If you have a website or a Facebook, it would be great to have more blogs. And if you have blogs, always send them over to David Doonan. He might want to put them out nationally and give you even more press. There's some other things that we can do in the media. I love to look at designs and make designs, and so I have a couple of things here. I have the Hillary Clinton logo, which is recognizable without her name, and you can understand that she's a political candidate because she's got the red and the blue. Sometimes when we're looking at our own imagery, we like to have a lot of words. You can do the next one and the next one. We like to have, we might not have all of the things that we want in the same image. On the one on the right, I kind of just made these two to just mess around. I put Nader 2000 in red and blue, so it looks like a political candidate. You can also use stars and stripes and the fire from Lady Liberty. Things like that will continue to make your logos look like political candidate logos and just generally political logos. If you want to focus on the earth, now you can actually just take the earth and put it behind anything you want. The thing on the bottom is about linguistic sort of a frame or a meme. Abortion is murder is probably the most effective one I've ever seen, because it already answers a question that you didn't even ask. It asks, you ask, is abortion right? And it says, no, it's wrong because murder is wrong. Murder is already illegal, so it already tells you that it's wrong. And we can do that with our own frames. And we kind of do it sometimes, like healthcare is a right. We're already saying that it's important to us. It's a right. I also like to use alliteration because they're easy to remember. They roll off the tongue. So maybe big oil is burglary. Maybe fracking is a felony. Fracking is a failure. These things might take off as sort of your three-word frame to an idea about environmentalism or an idea about whatever you have in your campaigns and local issues. So, I don't know, how many of you have used a meme generator before? A few of you, good. I love memes. And a meme, what is a meme? It's a unit of culture, according to Richard Dawkins, who decided what that word was. So what I mean by a unit of culture is that you have an image or you have something that everybody recognizes. This one is the Dos Equis man from the ad. But tons and tons of people have added different things and put something else. So instead of saying, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis, he says, I don't always Photoshop photos, but when I do, there are velociraptors in it. So people can make them funny. You can go to the next one. And people on the left are supposedly terrible at memes and don't know how to do them. So it's all the better to prove people wrong about it. We get to remix the meaning of these images and these GIFs, which are moving images, and all kinds of things. And we've had memes forever. We've had Shakespeare. Everybody knows certain Shakespeare phrases, so they use them in different contexts. That's what a meme is. We take something that everybody knows in culture and we use it in a context that serves us. So these can be really helpful in our online media, especially if we're trying to be funny or sarcastic. They help to bring some of that meaning across if we're really on the edge about it. Memes can also be pretty serious, and sometimes we may not even get the context. It's good to run them by people if they're going on something that's more official. Even if it's supposed to be kind of silly and funny, you might want to run it across somebody. So this one I made for our Madison issue that they're trying to replace the F-15s with F-35s. And it's a terrible deal. So I used the Trump phrase, this has been the worst deal in the history of deals maybe ever. So somebody commented back at me, well, Trump doesn't have anything to do with that. And I'm like, well, you should have looked at the bottom phrase, but it's not my part to blame somebody else for not getting my memes. So it's kind of good to share them around before they get to the public, unless you're pretty sure that it's sort of PC or it's okay to use. And they can be serious and informative, snarky, like this one. They can be rage comics, which is another kind of meme generator. You can put different things into the comic boxes and make your own story. For those of you who don't know, that is Pepe the Frog. He is now a hate symbol. So the one that I made here says, "You fool, you took the red pill," which that's another term. Just, you need to look it up on online. Look up your memes online. There's a very helpful website, Know Your Meme. If you want to know about memes, it's like the encyclopedia. And there's Gritty. Gritty is the communist character. He is usually shown now battling Pepe the Frog. They're like diametric opposites. And a lot of times we get accused of using too much identity politics in our media. This has been my way of dealing with it, and it's actually worked pretty well so far. So when somebody has said something like, just kind of racist and in bad taste, bad faith, arguing most likely, instead of saying the words, well, that was racist, you're a racist, I've used this meme because Richard Spencer is a white nationalist. He is a racist. So I've messaged that back, and that's kind of a little better because you're not the one saying it. He's the one saying it.
That's great. I like that.
So we can use these images in a lot of different ways. For you to say things, for somebody else to say it. And when we package it with images, a lot of the time, the humor is brought out a little bit better. So that's kind of my little aside about memes. I've actually used memes in these kinds of arguments. As Dave said earlier, it can be very time consuming to just kind of argue with trolls online. If you're going to debate people, make sure that it's very public and that you're looking the best out of the situation, because you're never going to convert this troll that you come up against, but you may have a lot of listeners, and those people are the people that you want to market to if you're going to be in a debate like this. The next slide has them bigger, so you can just show that. So this one over here is another far-right pundit. He calls himself a comedian. And his famous meme has changed my mind, because he would sit outside of universities and have some awful thing that he wants you to change his mind about, which you can't because he already has his talking points set up. And I used it to say, sounds like you only care about free speech when it's your team speaking. And the next one I said is, I can't tell if you're 100% trolling or if you actually believe yourself. So, a lot of humor. I like to turn these kinds of things around. And you can use these, or if you want to stay away from these folks altogether, I totally don't blame you at all. Next, please. And this last one is a meme that I'm just starting to work on as a marketing tool. So I learned how to make pretzels in January, and you can actually just buy some pretzels if you want. But people use the word salty to mean like it's kind of a bad taste in your mouth, like you're angry about it. Salty about politics, and then you can hand out pretzels and say go green. Because our pretzels are twisted, not our policy proposals. So I'm going to test this one out and see how it works locally, and if it works, I will get back to you on that one. So now that we're all into social media and we kind of know how to use it a little bit, I have this slide, how to not use social media, and I've got 3 rules for you. 1, no dirty laundry. You never know who's gonna read it. If you have more than 30 followers or 30 friends, you don't know those people. You don't know who they're sharing it to. And it's just best if you don't share your dirty laundry about how so-and-so in the Green Party is upsetting you, how such and such is a terrible policy. That's just not a good space for it. Instead, you can talk person to person, you can message people. There's a lot of ways to talk without blasting it online. Number 2, no swears. It's not just about the swear words, it's about what the algorithms find are swear words. If you want your content to reach a lot of people, there are certain words and phrases that get picked up. And I don't have a list of them. Nobody really has a list of them except for the people at the companies. But people realize that if they talk about certain issues, maybe it's Venezuela this week, maybe it's Syria, maybe it's something about refugees, that gets downgraded in content. So I don't say like don't talk about these issues, they're very important. But if you have something that you're trying to do as an advertising piece, that's probably not going to be up there on the top of what you want to do, because the algorithms are just not going to let people see it.
WTF, does that count as a swear?
Oh no, like I'm not saying literal swear words. It's like whatever the algorithms pick out as the bad words, the bad phrases, the bad pictures that they don't want shown because it doesn't serve their advertisers. They really like lifestyle content. They like things that are advertiser friendly. So if you're advertising, it's best to kind of blend in and look like that, so that you can actually get your message out. And once you've got it out, once people are engaged, you can pull them in with, look what's happening over here in this community, or whatever you're focused on. Yes, the third rule is no abandoned buildings. So let's say you decided to put up a website or a Facebook page a couple of years ago. and then you forgot about it, or somebody left and nobody's been using it, it's best not to advertise that place to go on your other media, because it's kind of like sending somebody to an abandoned address and saying, here's our office, and then they come in there and there's like one flyer on the floor from from when you used to work there. It's not terribly helpful. So if you're going to have some kind of media, it's best not to like spread yourself too thin, and just have something that stays updated at least on a monthly basis or so. And snail mail and email are still very important. You can still do newsletters, still do emails. And my best tip for that is maintain your contact list. We're working on that in Wisconsin right now to make sure that when we send letters out, we don't get them back, that they stay with the people. You can also schedule your media, especially on Nation Builder. You can schedule your emails, and that makes it a lot easier if you have time to do a couple of posts, a couple of email blasts, and then you don't have to go that day, that time that you want to go in the future to put that content out. So it's a little bit more helpful when we just have a spare hour or two. And if you have a 4-person media team in your state, you can have one post a month each, and it would be great because you'd have one post a week basically. If you don't have that many people, don't worry. Posting once a month is great for blogs. Posting once a week is great for Facebook, and anytime and anywhere on Twitter is kind of the rule. So, and media can be a community effort. First of all, you can be an example to all of the people who are interested in media by wearing your buttons, wearing your shirts, making that very prominent on yourself. You can make it a recreational activity too. You can just get a whole bunch of random shirts from a used clothing store or whatever, and just get some puffy paint and have a shirt painting party. So you have a whole bunch of shirts homemade. You can get a button making machine. You can, and they're not that expensive. You can also make it a competition. Yes. So this is an idea that I had for a possible competition. These are 3 of our 10 key values portrayed in button form. And you never know what kinds of local artists that you'll pull out of the community that might want a little extra exposure, that so-and-so made this great piece of art for our community green party. And pull those people out of the woodwork. If you have some really difficult work to do, like looking through your past media or stuffing envelopes, it's also good to offer food to your volunteers. You can get a lot of people that way. And remember that every project that you do is a learning opportunity. You can always make your media better the next time, but it's good to have something that's good enough now than to just be agonizing that you didn't make the perfect whatever it is, the perfect button, the perfect flyer, and never get anything out at all. And the last thing I want to talk about is monetary resources. We pay for things that we think have value. It may be worthwhile for you to hire some people to do this part-time. And that's probably not possible for a lot of us, but I think that we ought to work towards that sort of a goal, that we can have some folks working on this, because it is a 24-hour media operation that we're working under, and it's good to have more people involved. And if we are going to buy media, what worked before? What's been working for other green parties that are similar to ours? And the third idea is that we can also complain. The FCC will tell us what things cost for other parties. They'll tell us if a media buy was $10 or $10,000. And if you go to a TV station or a radio station trying to buy an ad and they say, well, we'll put it on, but you got to pay $1 million. We can go to those records and make sure that the other parties are buying at a similar rate too. And it's not just trying to keep us out of media. So with that, we really appreciate you joining us. And in our 24-hour media cycle, the Green Party may move fairly slowly and steadily, but we will win the race. And any questions? Yes.
I just have a couple of quick comments and I'll end with a question. So you're talking a lot about memes. I, a number of years ago, made a handful of memes. I shared one with Occupy Boston. They obviously really liked it, but I didn't put anything on it. I said it was mine. They copied it, put their logo on it, and shared it themselves. So just if you're creating anything, make sure it's yours if it takes off. Then also, I liked your point about if you get into an argument, try not to be hostile. I always like the scene from Thank You for Smoking, where he's teaching his son how to win a debate, and at the end of it, he's like, well, you still haven't convinced me. Well, I'm not after you, I'm after all of them. So always have the audience that is paying attention to it in mind. But then also a question, because you talked about media that's hostile, friendly, or neutral. But what about ambivalent media? We had a state candidate for treasurer last year who was completely ignored in the debates. And do you have any advice for dealing with media that just doesn't want to cover you at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say a lot of media falls into the category of not wanting to cover us at all. And first of all, you have to follow those tips. But I think that you can escalate the outreach. Maybe at first you're sending emails and making phone calls, but you see that they're ignoring you. Okay, send them a letter. Call them up as a candidate. Say, hey, I'm running for this office too. You cover these people, cover me too. And start by engaging them professionally, asking them politely to do their jobs. If they still refuse to do their jobs, maybe have a letter to the editor campaign. Maybe start going on their Facebook page, their Twitter, and say, hey, why are you guys ignoring this candidate? We've asked you nicely, now you're just blatantly showing your bias and violating FEC rules. And then at some point you have a mob of 10,000 people outside their office protesting, and you're live streaming from there. And at a certain point, either they cover you or you make it the story. And the thing is, there's no perfect strategy because we've seen the media, certain media outlets, they have their agenda and they're going to stick to it until the very end. But you can at the very least, expose what's going on. The same way that after reading Ralph Nader's book about the 2000 election, I realized, whoa, the presidential debates are a total sham. So you can open people's eyes to that. Any other real quick questions? Because we have to get out of here in a minute.
Thank you for your work. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of hopefully constructive comments. You did not, in any way, I think your presentation was very age biased in the sense that not a lot of people, look at people around here, not a lot of people here with gray hair and other people who are the largest amount of voters are sitting and, glued to Facebook and other memes, that sort of thing. So that long section about memes, it was like, with all due respect, what about hitting the Spanish communities? What about all of the other communities and stuff that are out there that are begging for content, begging for information? There's a lot of, I call them constructive, combative ways to get your candidate. I go on conservative talk radio all the time. They love it. They want controversy. They want action. They want excitement. That sort of stuff. People are driving by and they may not be listening to every single thing. If you're thinking that your audience is only NPR or some sort of sophisticated, blogging things that are the latest, I think you're not reaching the greatest amount. especially if you're talking to working class people, people who are trying to, you know, get by and all that sort of stuff. I found it, you know, your presentation, and I do respect you and all that sort of stuff, a little, you know, bonkish, for lack of a better term, as far as, you know, a lot of people and everything like that. And, you know, at one point, I've worked an awful lot with news media. They like interesting stories and everything. A little bit about the, you know, the crazy presentation that you gave there. I think you're well-meaning. I think you have to be creative, you know, and get some good points and stuff, and they will cover you if you have something good and creative that is like, oh, that's a new twist. You know, we have people who are actually protesting something in a way that, you know, makes it appeal to news media and other things and stuff. Just as constructive comments. Okay?
Yeah, a lot of my visuals would be useful on, on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. That combative idea does work well on that conservative radio a lot. So it's sort of the same thing, but in a visual way. But I totally get where you're coming from, and thanks for the constructive criticism.
Yeah, and we'd love to take more questions,
Yeah.
but unfortunately we
Well,
have
will
zero
this
time
ever
left.
solve-
Will this be available, or like on the
Yes, this is.
website?
Yeah, this
Sure.
is live streaming right now to the Green Party Facebook page,
Okay.
so you can watch it there. Thank you all.